We begin this first hour of Fox and Friends down in Florida. Former President Donald Trump heads down to Miami today ahead of tomorrow's federal court hearing as he faces dozens of charges over his handling of classified documents.
I didn't hear anything about this. This is news to me. Both federal and local authorities ramping up security measures as Trump supporters are rallying around him.
Jonathan Serrie is live outside the U.S. District Court building in South Florida with the latest. Good morning to you, Jonathan.
Good morning, Steve, Ainsley, and Brian. Security is always tight around federal courthouses, but you can only imagine it rises to a much higher level when the defendant is a former U.S. president. The Washington Post is reporting law enforcement are actively monitoring online threats from extremist groups, monitoring their plans for rallies in the Miami area. One of them reportedly planned for outside the courthouse tomorrow, and also bringing in additional officers. Mr. Trump has been indicted on 37 counts related to the alleged mishandling of classified White House documents stored in various locations around his Mar-a-Lago estate in Palm Beach, Florida. The charges include 31 counts of willful retention of national defense information, with other charges related to Mr. Trump's alleged efforts to conceal the documents from federal investigators. South Carolina Senator Lindsey Graham says although he does not like certain things the former president did, the charges against him go way too far.
President Trump will have his day in court, but espionage charges are absolutely ridiculous. Whether you like Trump or not, he did not commit espionage. He did not disseminate, leak, or provide information to a foreign power or to a news organization to damage this country. He is not a spy.
But Mr. Trump's former Attorney General, Bill Barr, says in this case, federal investigators were right to be concerned about how the former president was storing documents on military strategy and other sensitive information.
It quickly became clear that what the government was really worried about were these classified and very sensitive documents. I was shocked by the degree of sensitivity of these documents and how many there were. And I think the counts under the Espionage Act, that he willfully retained those documents, are solid counts. But I do think that even half, what Andy McCarthy said, which is if even half of it is true, then he's toast.
But some Republicans accuse the Justice Department of aggressively pursuing Mr. Trump while slow-stepping investigations into President Biden. Kentucky Congressman James Comer released more details about allegations from a confidential FBI source claiming that Mr. Biden accepted money from a foreign national to influence policy decisions while Mr. Biden was serving as vice president.
The reason I think it's credible, Trey, is because this was dated, this last 1023, in June or July of 2020, 3 years before anybody knew about the shell companies and knew that the Bidens were laundering money through 6 different American banks. In the 1023, the informant says that the payee alleges that he paid the bribe to the Bidens and that no one would ever find it because the way they set it up, they transferred the money through so many different banks, it would take 10 years for investigators to find out.
At rallies over the weekend, Mr. Trump accused federal prosecutors of trying to suppress his political ambitions, but he says that will not deter him for his campaign for a second term in the White House. Back to you guys.
And Jonathan, you touched a little bit on this. You mentioned Donald Trump yesterday. Yesterday, he was on the radio with Roger Stone and called for protests in advance and after what happens at the courthouse behind you. I read the same article you did in the Washington Post. It talks a little bit about how law enforcement is a little worried about the fact that it sounds like one of the rallies is going to be thrown by the Proud Boys down there.
That's right. According to the Washington Post article, the Proud Boys are organizing a rally outside the courthouse here, and that certainly raises the level of concern. When Mr. Trump was calling for protests, at least in the soundbite I heard, he also specified peaceful protests, but the concern among law enforcement is that if some of these more extreme groups get involved, the rallies may be less than peaceful.
That's exactly right. Jonathan, thank you very much. Also, Roger Stone encouraged the demonstrators to remain peaceful and legal.
Well, they have amped up security down in Miami because of this. They're monitoring some threats online and some talk online. He's traveling from Bedminster down to Miami, as we've been reporting today. Secret Service, it's being reported, they were trying to tell him, don't go down today, let's go tomorrow.
Yeah.
Right, and on Tuesday, after his indictment about 3 o'clock, we don't know if it's going to be a mugshot, it'll be fingerprinted, there'll be no cameras in the courtroom, but we do know about 8:15 he's going to give a speech. So that's going to be big news. And he's saying, look, Joe Biden's looking to jail his #1 opponent that's beating him in the polls and is the winning big time for the nomination. Both things of relate is true. And it seems as though after the New York case, he got a huge bump in the polls. Seems like it's going to happen again. There's a lot of people, as Lindsey Graham brought up yesterday, and William Barr said it. Listen, he said, I want to bat with you over other situations. I've been there with you before. I think you've been unjustly targeted, and I've said that. But this case, there's a lot there. Lindsey Graham says it might be true. There's a lot there. But people have shut off ever since 2015, seeing from the day he won and the Russia investigation, trying to delegitimize him, what happened after 2020, the doubts people had about the election. And now you hit him with the indictment with Alvin Bragg, which is a farce. And then this, if it does indeed have substance, people have shut off. So half the country has shut off this indictment. You can't convince them, at least half the country.
Well, 110 years he's facing for having documents in his house that Joe Biden also had the same documents, classified documents, in his garage next to his Corvette. And Hillary Clinton is bleach bidding and using hammers to destroy her evidence. It's just such a double standard, and that's what the New York Post is writing about this morning. Here's the headline. What about the Bidens? Trump was indicted, but what about the Bidens? And it talks about the Corvette and his garage and just the double standard. And that's what Lindsey Graham was focusing on. Yeah, he might have done something wrong. He should have returned these documents when asked about it. Right. Never should have taken them. But neither should the former vice president. Neither should have Joe Biden. Joe Biden was a vice president and maybe a senator when he had some of these documents.
Right. Absolutely. To a lot of people, it looks like there's an uneven standard of justice. For the Republicans, luckily, the Republicans in the oversight and judiciary are looking into it. There was we have a quote from Miranda Devine. She writes in the New York Post today a little bit about this. Biden laughs off FBI bribery claims as evidence against him and Hunter mounts.
Because he said, show me the money.
Right,
where's the money?
Stephen Nelson asked at that particular press event on Thursday. It's interesting. O.J. Simpson, of all people, yesterday came out and he said, look, I've had some of the world's greatest lawyers. I've had Johnny Cochran and I've had Alan Dershowitz. And this is the advice that I would give to Donald Trump that I got from my lawyers. And he said, don't talk about the case publicly. Don't do interviews about the case. He said, quote, I don't know if Donald's lawyers are stressing this to him, but if not, they should be fired and he should sue them. So O.J. Simpson is essentially saying Donald Trump has got to stop talking about the case because he'll just dig a hole for himself.
I think it was Joe Contra this morning on Fox and Friends First who made a good point, and it's so obvious, but it just dawned on me. He said, you know, in other countries we see political opponents get thrown in prison because of something that they have done in the past, or just as a corrupt government, a banana republic. And we've seen that down in Venezuela and Caracas. We've seen that in other countries. And that's what's happening here, it seems.
Andy McCarthy, who said, if half of this is true, the president's in real trouble. He also said Jim Jordan should demand, as chairman of the Oversight Committee, an update on what's happened with Joe Biden. Because you can't sit there, and if Jack Smith's going to come out and says, no one's above the law and equal justice for all, people don't buy that, whether you love Jack Smith or not. He's had some problems in the past in this prosecution. Look at Governor McDonald over in Virginia. So having said that, if you want equal justice, then just show me the equal justice on Joe Biden. And if you tell me you're not done, how about an update? Because a lot's at stake here. Meanwhile, Joe Rogan picked out something that's been abundantly true, is that Joe Biden's been lying his entire professional life. He's been lying about the speeches he had. He's been lying about his grades in college. He's been lying about the double major he never had, his athletic scholarship he didn't get. And he goes way, way back, and it's continuing today. He brought that up on his podcast.
All the stuff with his son and the ties to Ukraine and China and the money, the family, they got paid millions of dollars, and everyone's trying to obscure it because, well, it's better than Trump, better than Trump. If that guy was a Republican, they would be up his with a microscope.
I know, it is unbelievable.
They went with this corrupt career politician.
Yeah.
I mean, it's wild stuff, man. The media is overwhelmingly left-leaning. And if you have a left-leaning politician or a left-wing Democratic politician, and then you have this media that essentially works to support that person, I mean, they ignore any information that leads to distrust in the government or distrust in this administration or distrust in this party, this political party.
Yeah, it's the dark arts, man.
Yesterday on Fox News Sunday, which was the same show that Bill Barr said if half the stuff is true about Trump, he's toast. Donald Trump's attorney, Alina Habba, who's not representing him on the all-encompassing case, said that Mr. Trump would soon make a determination whether or not he wants a speedy trial, which he is entitled to. And also she said that she did not envision in any world would he ever take a plea deal.
Right.
Just not going to.
And by the way, in no world will he ever want a speedy trial, ever. This guy will drag it out, and he should, as long as he could, as long as he can. It'll take about a year. Drag it out, build up his case. He's got to go 37 for 37 and then run for president. And the best thing he could do, as Adrian said to Rocky after being in her coma for way too long in Rocky 2, he said, Rocky, come here. No. Do you remember?
She woke up and
she said, Rocky.
She said, fight, right? Go
nope.
fight, go
Steve,
do it.
do you remember?
I saw that movie 45 years ago.
Okay.
Okay, what'd she say?
She said, win.
Win.
And then Mick said, what are we waiting for? And if he wins, he exonerates himself. Right.
And the music starts.
You remember that, Chris?
Dun-dun-dun.
Thank you. You were no help.
All right, well, Donald Trump says even if he's convicted, he says, I will never leave. He said, this is third world country stuff. You get indicted over nothing. Ridiculous, baseless, most horrific abuses of power in the history of our country. He said that in Georgia, the Republican event.
I'm Steve Doocy.
I'm Brian Kilmeade.
And I'm Ainsley Earhart. And click here to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page to catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis.